today we're just going to talk about some important information for registered nurses and nurse practitioners to consider when they're thinking about going into self-employment. So as nursing consultants, there's 3 of us at the CRNNL. We receive a really large number of calls from RNs and NPs who are looking for direction with respect to what they need to know before they take on self-employment. So this presentation is just meant to give you a broad overview of important things to consider and some things that you might not even know that you need to think about. So first of all, we have to define what self-employment is, or defining self-employment. So if you're going to be a self-employed registered nurse, you have to hold a practicing license as a registered nurse or be registered as a nurse practitioner, because what you are doing is considered nursing practice. Self-employment is also called private practice or independent practice, depending on what literature you read or who you're talking to. But with self-employment, you're operating your own economic enterprise, so it's like your own business. But there's a number of ways that you could do that. So you could be a sole practitioner, meaning that you own the business and that is providing the nursing services. Like you could be operating a foot care business and you're providing the foot care services. Or you could be in a business relationship with another party. So you perform nursing services for another party. And an example of that would be you're employed as an RN in a spa to provide foot care services. So if you're in a business relationship, if you're not the sole practitioner, if you're not the one who owns and operates the business, and you know you're working in collaboration or in a partnership or a business relationship with someone else, you have to think about, are you in a contractual relationship? So you're contracted as a nurse to provide foot care services to a spa, or are you an employee of that business where you are providing nursing services? And this gets a little bit important later on when we're thinking about developing policies and procedures, or the custodial, who's the custodian of the client information. Also, I just wanted to point out, so if you're holding yourself out as a registered nurse practitioner, then providing nursing services, then you're accountable for all aspects of your practice. But if you are not holding yourself out, or you do not hold a license, but you are providing nursing services, and they expect you to be operating as a nurse, but you don't have a license, then you're practicing without a license. So it's important to know what type of enterprise you're entering into. And there's a lot of misconceptions about what's considered self-employment and what's not. And these are just some of the things that we hear. I'm only doing this on the side, so this is not my main employer. I'm not self-employed. I'm just doing this on the side for some money. I only have one client, or I only do this once or twice a month. So you need to think about, if you're getting paid for providing nursing services, then it is considered self-employment. So if you hold a license as a registered nurse or nurse practitioner, what does that mean? So self-employed registered nurses and nurse practitioners must be knowledgeable about regulatory policy, relevant federal and provincial legislation and regulation, and any other requirements. And you must integrate that appropriately into your self-employed practice. So self-employed RNs and NPs, in addition to meeting your regulatory requirements, you do have federal and provincial legislation to meet. And that could be something as simple as you have to meet all of Canada Revenue Agency's reporting procedures, or any provincial expectations for payments, such as HST or payroll, payer account numbers, or education, taxes, or workplace safety registration, and you have to do your annual filing of income. So besides just your nursing accountabilities, you do have an accountability on the business side as well. Self-employed RNs and NPs are responsible for the services they deliver, and again, to the nature of their nurse-client relationship, and you're accountable to the client of whom you provide the care, or on behalf of whom you're providing nursing services for, if you're getting paid to provide those services. So RNs and NPs are required to practice within their legislative scope of nursing practice. And there's many regulatory documents that go along with self-employment. You have your standards of practice and your code of ethics, your scope of practice, meaning that helps you define what you're educated, authorized, and competent to do. We do have a document on self-employment, and that document is being revised just to be a little bit more user-friendly and to consider virtual nursing services. But you still have to follow, because you are a registered nurse and providing nursing services, documentation standards and advertisement guidelines and the therapeutic nurse-client relationship. And then you still have to be able to maintain your continued competency. So when you're talking about competence, that really comes from your scope of practice document. And as a self-employed registered nurse, you're expected to practice within your area of competence. And so you must critically assess what nursing knowledge, skills, competence, and experience that you have, and you ensure that you have the necessary knowledge, skills, judgment, and experience to be able to do what you're doing in self-employment. And even besides what you can do, there's lots of considerations for nurses who are in self-employment, because you're not surrounded by a lot of colleagues that can help you critically think through a situation. If you're providing services and you're alone or in a self-employment setting, you have to be able to manage all outcomes and expected and unexpected outcomes within your setting. So if you were to do a procedure or give a medication and something went wrong and you needed a crash cart, you have to think about your setting. Can you manage the outcomes if you needed to manage an unexpected outcome? And you don't have access to a colleague to critically think through a situation. So part of being in self-employment is that we need to establish that network. One of the things that came up recently is in self-employment, if you are in self-employment and there are public health measures that are going on, and that there's mandatory reporting for certain public health and safety measures, then you would need to be linked with that system so that you can abide by the legislation for reporting. So if you are thinking about going into self-employment, there are some things that you need to consider and you need to complete that will help you start off your business. So you do use your standards of practice and your code of ethics to support your practice and to guide your conduct. But you might need to develop policies and procedures for your specific area of practice and to help you assist in decision-making in relationship to the nursing services you're providing. So some of the information that you might want to have a policy on or make sure that it complies with what's needed in the nursing profession. You might need a policy on what you document, on record management, on how to obtain informed consent, a policy or procedure on cleaning of equipment, how you're going to be compliant with the Personal Health Information Act, how you're going to collaborate services with other providers or, duty to report. You might need policies and procedures on payment for services and succession planning and closing a practice, because there needs to be a way for you to refer your clients to another service provider and to transfer the client's health record. So when I said if you are in a contractual relationship or if you're an employee of a different company, so if you're employed by a private company, you need to advocate to make sure that they have policies and procedures for you to follow that support your nursing practice and help you maintain your standards of practice. And if you are on your own or you're a sole practitioner, then you would need to have these policies and procedures developed. So we get a lot of calls about, well, how do I develop a policy on informed consent? And so we don't provide information on how to do policies, but we would link you or give you some resources to go by, because there's many people, nurses in self-employment, that would be willing to share how they went about doing their policies and procedures. And consent is a big one too. So consent for self-employed RNs, because we have a legal and ethical responsibility to obtain a validated documented consent from our clients for any nursing services, and to ensure that our practices regarding informed consent comply with the law and as the law currently evolves. And then, like I said, we need to identify professional support systems. And there's many special interest groups, and there's many mentors that can assist you in identifying, obtaining, and maintaining confidence in your practice so you can comply with the CCP program. And they can help you with development of your business and the policies and the procedures. So we often recommend you to contact CNPS and your lawyer or business consultant to discuss issues related to professional liability, general liability, and other forms of insurance. So CNPS is your liability for the nursing services you provide, the liability protection for the nursing services you provide. However, CNPS does not provide business insurance. And the difference with that is, so they will provide support if you make a mistake from the nursing services that you're providing. But if you get sued for charging too much tax, or if someone slips and falls on your property, then CNPS will not cover that, and you will need to have a separate insurance. And the other part that you need to do is, once you go into self-employment, you need to make sure that you notify the CRNNL. Our regulations, the Registered Nursing Regulations of 2013, require registered nurses and nurse practitioners to notify CRNNL of any change of employer, including the addition of self-employment, within 30 days of change or addition. And that is located on the CRNNL website. It's called My CRNNL. And then for nurse practitioners in particular, you must also provide your business name and telephone information. Another big one that we get a lot of comments on is, who's the custodian of the client record? It could be you. So if you are operating as a sole practitioner in self-employment, then that would be you. You would have to comply with the Personal Health Information Act on the collection, use, and disclosure of health information. And you need to understand all the obligations of custodian of health information and any other requirements under FIA. So we always encourage you to refer to the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador's website for information related to FIA and to their online learning modules. And that's just the link for it there. If you are working as a contracted employee for a physician's office, then the physician's office might be the custodian of the client record, because you would keep it in the physician's office. It would be double locked in that office, and that's where the health information would be kept. But it's something that you need to ask about, because if you're going house to house, or you're making home visits, and the information is not expected to come back to the physician's office, then you would have to comply with custodial requirements. Hours of practice as a registered nurse and a nurse practitioner. So it is important to understand for self-employment that even though you are practicing, you are claiming hours as a registered nurse, that only your nursing practice hours, or the hours that you carry out doing your nursing practice, constitute the hours towards your licensure. So all self-employed business activities may not always be applied towards the required registered nurse or nurse practitioner hours. And it might be necessary for you to distinguish what components of your self-employed practice are business and what components are nursing. And the nursing would be, it might seem obvious that, it would be where you use the nursing process and you're using your assessment and skills. And your documentation and all that would be considered nursing practice hours. But if you are doing something like scheduling, or if you're doing payment, or you're doing taxes, then those components are considered non-nursing. Further, some tasks, although they are enhanced by nursing knowledge, are not nursing practice. So, for example, infection control principles enhance the quality of a tattooing business, but if you're operating a tattoo business, you can't, and you're still a registered nurse, you can't use, the fact that you're using infection control principles and operating a tattoo business and claim it as nursing hours. So we can help you determine if your practice will be considered nursing practice, or what hours will be considered nursing practice, and that's a lot of the calls that we get in policy and practice. We are currently working on a fact sheet that will help you to, self-reflect on what you're doing, and then determine what parts of your self-employment constitutes practice hours as a registered nurse or a nurse practitioner. So documentation confirming your hours of practice have to be verified by an independent third party, so you can get your accountant or your office manager or a person just to verify that, these hours were used for nursing practice. Self-report of hours are not accepted, and anything really related to hours for submission, it's best to just email registration at CRNNL.ca. That should say CRNNL. So it's lots of things to consider. Some other considerations that don't usually, come front of mind when you're thinking about starting a new business. My regular job is a great place to find new clients. So that would be considered a conflict of interest, and we're supposed to manage perceived conflicts of interest in your practice. And then you have to think about your advertising. So like No Family Doctor, No Problem, we can provide the exact same services here. So advertising must be in a way that, conducted in a way that is responsible and transparent, and it cannot reasonably mislead the public. And then you do have to follow the Canadian Code of Advertising Standards. So if you are self-employed and it's your secondary employment, or you're also employed in a healthcare organization, you just need to be aware of the ethical implications of engaging in both roles. If you do have a self-employed practice, then you should inform your current employer of that self-employed practice and know your employer's conflict of interest policies or positions. You should, not refer clients from your current employment into your private practice because of conflict of interest. And if you looked at the Canadian Code of Advertising guidelines as well, they would state that, your clients need to have a choice. So if you're going to offer suggestions, then it cannot just be your own business that you're suggesting. You must ensure that as part of the Code of Ethics, we ensure that our personal or private interests do not interfere with the interests of the persons receiving our care. Also, advertising must be consistent with the public image of a positive public image of nursing and within legal ethics. And it needs to comply with the CNA Code of Ethics, our standards and guidelines, and like I said, the Canadian Code of Advertising Services. So CRNNL has a specific role in self-employment. Our role is for public protection. We provide resources to help support registered nurses and nurse practitioners to meet their regulatory expectations, and that's in all roles and all settings, including self-employment. We are available to provide direction on practice-related concerns or questions, but CRNNL does not approve business endeavors or provide business advice. So we will not be able to tell you what's an appropriate fee or any kinds of processes related to the business aspects of it. And we would just say that it's the responsibility of the individual RN to set a reasonable fee structure that is in line with the nursing services being provided. And, that to ensure that the client is aware of such things before the onset of a professional relationship. I did recently see this article, and there is a special interest group called the Canadian Association for Self-Employed RNs, and this was published in Canadian Nurse. And it's actually a really interesting article, and it provides a lot of information for registered nurses and nurse practitioners who are considering self-employment. It talks about how RNs and NPs in private practice are helping to fill gaps in access to healthcare services, and that it's an extremely important role. Additionally, if you reach out to special interest groups and other people in self-employment, then you can establish that collegial network that you might need for, to assist you in maintaining your continued confidence and to advancing your practice. So that's just some of the considerations for self-employed practice.